During her time as a clinical lecturer at Imperial College London, she's designed, developed and trialled a highly effective weight management programme, SatPro, and so much more by way of introduction. But I'm going to jump straight in because there is a lot to get through. There's so much to ask. There's so much in the book. And I'm sure that everybody who's signed in will have many questions too. And I want to get through as many of those as we can. So Dr. Saira, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on, Hannah. It's my pleasure.
What sets it apart from the many, many other diets you know, that over the years people have been told to follow?
Yeah.
Because obviously I think a sort of sigh sometimes is what people feel when they think, oh gosh, you know, what next? But what sets this apart in a positive way? From
I think you've hit the nail on the head. So many people come to my clinic and they're just tired, and you know, they've tried it for 20 years and they're fed up. They feel like they're at the end of the line, and boy, they really, really have tried. So I think what's really different about this is the scientific underpinning. So what I mean by that is that all of the book and all of the practical advice has been designed around the scientific evidence base. And there's a huge number of references, as you've seen at the back, that people can check out if they want to know more. So that if you use the great science that's out there, maybe it's about appetite or metabolism or exercise or sleep or genes, to build a program, the premise should be that you are working kind of in harmony with your biology. And you and your body are pulling in the same direction. Because in the past, I think other diets, maybe very restrictive plans or meal replacements and so on, I explain in the book why those didn't feel good. So at that point, you are pulling in the opposite direction from your biochemistry. And it's pretty hard to fight your biochemistry because ultimately your biochemistry will always win. You know, you just can't exert enough willpower. So I think the science is incredibly important. I think the fact that it's born from Imperial College, so it's been put through a very rigorous research protocol, I think is really important for people to feel that this is something designed by experts. This is something that has been tried out, and this has been tried out in real life people just like me. So this wasn't in kind of, there are two sorts of research study, broadly speaking. Sometimes you can just volunteer to be a research study. You're not necessarily a patient within that unit. You're somebody who sees an advert or sees something online and very generously volunteers to take part. The people who took part in this research study were people who just happened to have been referred to our clinic at that point in time. So these are people with, you know, absolutely with real health problems who are seeking that way to lose weight and improve their health. So I think the research element is hugely, hugely important for people to take on board and feel reassured by. And I think lastly, you know, it's written based on years and years of clinical experience. So it's not a case of, you know, I just have this good idea, or this seems quite likely to work, or this feels okay, because the program that the full diet is based on has been run in our unit now for years. It's been constantly subjected not only to peer review, very, very important, but also to patient feedback. So people saying, I liked this, or I didn't quite like this, or I didn't quite understand that, or I think there should be lots more emphasis on this, has meant that that sort of constant feedback from people kind of going through it has honed it to where it is now. So I think all those things make it quite stand apart and quite different. And I really hope the people joining this evening kind of pick that up too, and they hopefully read the book.
I mean, I think that one of the things that's profoundly frustrating, I've read about this a fair bit, and I'm sure many people have, but it really comes, you know, comes to the forefront in your book that this scare, the sort of fat scare of around 40 years ago, potentially one of the most damaging things in every way to our health today, and has turned into such a fixed mindset and narrative, and it feels like getting out of that is really what this is all about.
I think that's important. I think demonizing, you know, any one macronutrient was not the best approach. And I think you're right. I think it got really burned into the public consciousness. And, you know, the general public are really smart. I know that because they come to my clinic, you know, every day of the week, and they take on the advice. So people who come to my clinic are really trying to do the right thing. So if they've been told, eat low fat, or, you know, have light products or diet products and so on, that's what they're doing. But the reason that that they're not making the progress that they want to, is that the advice, wasn't very good. And actually, as I described in the full diet, when you go back to eating natural, healthy fats, so this is not a high fat diet. This is not about sort of adding fat in a way that no food culture would understand. It's not about sort of adding butter to your coffee or anything like that, but it's about using fat in a way that your grandparents might have done. So in a natural, normal way, and using fats that kind of nature put on this earth for you. So fat gets really confusing. You see lots of things on food packets about polyunsaturated and monounsaturated and saturated. So, oh my gosh, I can't get my head around this. But actually, if you say, did nature put this fat on the planet for me, like the fat in an avocado, for example, or the fat in chicken skin? And if the answer is yes, that's a pretty good guide that it's going to be okay. Because I think perhaps where we went wrong is that there was this ancient foodstuff, fat, that humans had eaten for millennia without ill effect. And then suddenly when, weight problems and cardiovascular problems became an issue in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, we were suddenly blaming this ancient foodstuff and these modern disease epidemics. And that somehow doesn't feel intuitive. And then when you sort of look at the sort of evidence base, I think that's held up.
But what's so interesting, and you say that fat on the body, rather than fat in foods, it's an etymological coincidence that's resulted in these years of confusion.
Yeah.
They're not one and the same. That's so important to.
They're not one of the things. I mean, you're absolutely right, Hannah. That's such an important point, because whenever we talk about fat in our patient groups, somebody will always understandably ask, well, if I eat fat, won't I get fat? But actually, because you're absolutely right, these two words so confusing. And what I say in the book is just reframe the label that you give the tissue that lies under your skin. So instead of calling it fat, you can call it the medical word adipose tissue. If that helps break that connection between the fat in food and me getting fat, because it really does lead to caution and confusion and worry for a lot of people.
So the diet that what perhaps it'd be better good idea for you to lay out what the basic principle is, because you say eat like your grandparents ate, that they ate bread.
Absolutely.
Don't eat bread. So perhaps you could explain to me.
And I promise you, and if I don't circle back to the my grandparents ate bread point, please remind me, because one of my patients will always say this, and it's such an important point. So let's look at the actual premise of and I'm gonna really emphasize this is just the food part. So food in the book is one chapter, and I always say this to my patients as well, that food in the book is one chapter, and it's a 14-chapter book. So if you only focus on the food, you're only going to benefit from 1/14 of the advice in the programme. That's a really just important thing to state. But yes, we must look at the food bit because it's important in terms of health and of course weight loss. So the first thing to think about is having a nice and steady blood sugar level, and I'm going to explain to you why. When you eat high carbohydrate food, like bread or breakfast cereal or pasta, your body will very quickly break that down into the sugar building blocks, glucose. So within 30 to 60 minutes, whether you've had toast for breakfast or a slice of cake, the amount of sugar that ends up in your blood will be quite a lot, because your body will have broken that carbohydrate down, and you will get a surge in blood sugar. And your body doesn't like to have a lot of excess sugar in the blood. It needs a bit, it doesn't need lots, and lots kind of, it doesn't function well with too much. So that sugar has to be moved out of the blood. So you produce this hormone called insulin. And what insulin does is it moves the sugar out of your blood. Good, blood sugar goes back to normal after eating, but that sugar has to go somewhere. There's only 3 places really that it can go. Some of it can go into your liver and be stored in the form of a starch, but only a small amount. Some of it can go to your muscles, your biceps, your triceps. So next time you're carrying or shopping or something, it can be used for activity. But again, the capacity of your muscles to store sugar is pretty low. So the rest of that excess sugar from things like breakfast cereal or bread or potatoes, insulin will push that sugar into fat storage and we gain weight. The good news here is that if we control the blood sugar level, we can run a low insulin level. And I write in the book that insulin is the fat controller. so that when insulin runs low, that is the signal to fat to break down and we lose weight. So one of the pieces of advice in the book is to eat in a way that keeps your blood sugar stable. So that means eating food like, eggs or vegetables, certain fruits, nuts, a bit of meat, cheese, etc. And you can put together some really delicious meals in that way. Keep your blood sugar stable. Insulin is therefore not pushing sugar into fat storage. Second thing you've mentioned, eat healthy fats. Don't seek out fat. Please don't sort of add, half a sort of pat of butter to your vegetables, but sure, have a teaspoon or two if that livens up the vegetables that you're eating. That tastes good, and that makes us want to eat our vegetables. Vegetables are a great thing. The third thing is please steer clear of ultra-processed food. So what is ultra-processed food? Well, ultra-processed food, sort of rule of thumb, is that it's food that when you look at the ingredients are weird, and the ingredients are not ingredients that a standard person would keep in their kitchen. So really odd stuff, emulsifiers, anti-foaming agents, thickeners, artificial sweeteners, and so on. Today in the UK, 50% of what we eat is either processed or ultra-processed. And that is fueling our weight gain and diabetes epidemic, no two ways about it. So if we just go back to basics and we say, I don't know what anti-foaming agent is, and I'm sure my body doesn't know what it is, and I'm sure my body's not going to respond very well to me eating it, how can I just be a bit more straightforward than that in the fuel that I put into my body? So in the same way that if you had a really expensive sports car, you wouldn't put any old fuel in, you'd be really careful about it. So we've got to give our body the same kind of care, because your body's way more expensive than way more valuable than an expensive car. So fuel your body with simple, straightforward foods, like chicken, eggs, apples. Now, it doesn't have to be bland. You can do all sorts of things to those ingredients to really lift them and bling them up. But you know what chicken is and you know what apples are. No dubious ingredients, no tricks, nothing odd. Your health will really improve. And you won't only lose weight. Many of my patients report that lots of niggling symptoms that they had, being bloated after eating, having a headache every day, having acid reflux, those things improve remarkably quickly. So those are the sort of three important kind of features of full diet eating. And people watching, people who have joined tonight might think that sounds a bit much, or I don't know, that sounds a bit full on. Actually, I just really want to reassure them that so many people have done this program here at our hospital, really busy people, sometimes with more than one job, and they've made it work. It's very doable in real life. I really have to reassure people of that. And you develop this sort of virtuous cycle that because you're feeling so good and the weight is falling, you're absolutely motivated to keep on going. That's the pattern that I see. But Hannah, we have to come back to your question.